Have you ever wondered what it's like to own your own business? Be your own boss? Welcome to Season 7 of Business Mentorship, Keepin It Real, where we meet with corporate leaders who have taken the leap to business owner and join us as part of the Share Your Stories Online series. Hello, I'm Trish Tonak, and today we're going to meet a small business owner, celebrate their great idea, and introduce you to the person behind the logo. We invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to the show. Our guest joins us from Adelaide, Australia. Sinja Hallam is the founder of The Power to Transform. She is a Forbes ICF-certified Leadership and Executive Coach, Keynote speaker, and published author. She helps leaders rise with clarity, confidence, calm, and heart. Her clients include Fortune 100s, CEOs, senior and emerging leaders. Sinja is going to share her story on entrepreneurship and give us a behind-the-scenes look into the life of a small business owner. I'd like to introduce and welcome everyone to Sinja.
Hi, Trish. Thank you so much for inviting me on the podcast today. It's so exciting to be here.
You know what's really wonderful is I did a real deep dive on your story before we connected, of course. And one of the things I noticed is that you had spent most of your career in male-dominated industries like oil and gas and mining. Give us an indication how you sort of flipped the dial to working with women who may obviously be in the same, male-dominated industries to help them overcome some of those obstacles.
That is a very good question, Trish. And I would like to begin with, I flipped the dial twice. So my original career was as a professional ballerina. And then
How cool is that? That's so cool.
And then to find myself in male-dominant environments is just so surreal, right? I didn't know that's how I would end up in my career. But that career has served me really well to do what I do today. So when I was in male-dominant environments, I often found myself having the belief that I had to work harder and smarter than anybody else, right? And I looked at my counterparts that were male in those environments, and they somehow managed to grow their careers far quicker than I could. And I often wondered at the time, like, why that is. And then when I noticed myself people-pleasing and wanting to be valued, heard, and seen, and so working harder to do that. But the very key difference that I noticed is that the confidence that men present with and the confidence that women present with is very different. And I learned in my career through a mentor in the oil and gas industry, actually, that we are not serving ourselves well as women in male-dominant environments when we think that we can work really hard and be picked.
Wow, that's a revelation.
Absolutely. It was so like mind-blowing to me when my mentor asked me, like, why are you waiting to be picked? Nobody else does it.
Wow.
And it's like, wow, you're like, I thought that's what I had to do. I thought I had to be picked, not I could ask. And then I started really observing, like, what are my male counterparts doing? And they are asking for the positions that they want. They are putting themselves forward for the difficult projects. They are asking to be chosen for those projects. And I am sitting back waiting to be chosen based on my performance on how hard I'm working.
That must be, that's such a wonderful thing for our viewing and listening audience to hear as women in business, because we know that it's still a patriarchal society. That's a given. We know that. There's less than 2% female CEOs in Fortune 500 companies. You know that. And we
Absolutely.
do feel that we have to be picked for those positions. You're absolutely right. We really feel that if we present ourselves in a way and we go and ask, we're going to hear those words. You're too aggressive. You're being too pushy. Why don't you just sit back and relax and wait? But your mentor was actually giving you permission to change that dynamic.
Absolutely. And I am forever grateful for this mentor.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
in my career, when I look back, I had two male mentors that really had my back. And when you define what is an ally for a woman, then these are the epitome of that, these two mentors, because they spoke about me when I wasn't in the room. They
Oh, that's amazing.
they had access to information that I didn't have access into,
Sure.
and they said, these are the projects that are coming up. Why don't you put yourself forward for them? Right. And
Wow.
so it was really good to, receive that information. Some people hold that information back.
Right.
Um, and I've also often found that when you are in male dominant environments and you reach the positions of influence, that the women are the one that are actually harder to work with.
Yes, absolutely. Because they've had to fight and scrape and muscle their way into those jobs, right?
Absolutely. So once they've muscled their way into that job, as you called it, it's very hard for them to share it or
Right.
lend a hand up. So they
Yeah.
protect those positions, right? And
Mhm.
from a position of there aren't enough.
Right.
But
Right.
I always thought that you can create. If when you get into those positions, you can create. And that is what my two mentors also taught me. Like when you get into these positions, you can create more, you can expand. You don't have
Right.
to keep it the way it is. You don't
Right.
have to keep it small. So think about how can you expand and make everything you touch bigger. And so
Right.
I thought, right? And if you have that type of thinking, then you are always on the hunt naturally for improving things and not necessarily making things less. What I mean by that is making people redundant because you found a more efficient way to doing things. It is more about putting people through to higher order tasks that add more
Sure.
value.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
when we look at those things, the opportunities and the choices that you can make just open up. And
Yeah, they're endless then.
yeah, and that's what I learned in the field,
Right.
right? So
Right.
sometimes when you think, okay, I've moved from the ballet stage right through to the Australian desert where it's hot, I'm in my safety gear, I'm in equipment, the clothing that is very thick.
Right.
Is always long sleeved, is always long pant, woolen socks, safety boots, safety glasses, helmet on, right?
Certainly
You
not very glamorous.
It's not glamorous. Prospecting. I found a way to make it glamorous though, by
Yes.
always
Yes.
having a pretty belt or a pretty
Yes.
scarf if it was
Yes.
winter. So I did find a way, but um, to bring myself to the desert as well, not just, what I had to bring, but to also bring myself. And
For
uh,
sure.
what I learned in the desert is that there's not a lot there, but what is there is appreciated. And the most that people want from you in the desert is to actually go, how can we make this better for ourselves? Not
Right.
about, minimizing things. It's literally about how can we improve? How can we make this better? How can we make it more comfortable for ourselves? And do things with ease when it's already hard.
Right.
This is where the beginnings of coaching sort of came
I was
open.
just going to say, is that how you got to this intentionally
Yeah.
you series, right? Because
Yes.
how else can you show up in your authentic self and expand and co-create if you're not comfortable with yourself?
Absolutely. And I do recall the very first day. My very first day and my very last day are imprinted in my brain. So my very first day in the desert, I arrived to a bunch of things I've never encountered before, right? And the very first words that were uttered is, "What's the office princess doing here? And what does she think she can do?"
Oh, wow. That's demoralizing.
It is very demoralizing. At the same time, there was a colleague of mine that had started newly to the team as well, was a gentleman, and he was invited to the bar at the end of the long day, and I wasn't. And I wasn't going to push myself into this group. I was going to earn my place, as we do.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Um, And then when my mentor found out about it, he said, "Oh, Sinja, you've got to do something about this for yourself, because what we're doing actually, and we don't mean to, it's unconscious or subconscious for most of the guys in the field, is that they invite the newbie to the bar." They get to know them a little bit and work out whether this person will fit in or not fit in very quickly. There's a word for it, but maybe it's
Sure.
not on the
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah, yeah, for sure. For
Right?
sure. Yeah.
Yes. And then when they're accepted, and then everything goes great. With you, they want to see you operate and see what you can do, right? And so
Right.
it's unconsciously that you have to work harder. But
Right.
you could ask. And then I thought, well, how do you earn respect and trust? And that is not by asking. So in this moment, I'm going to have to earn the trust. It
Right.
took me about 6 to 9 months to earn that. But when
Right.
I did, oh my God, my life got so much easier. So
I bet.
what happened is I saved their hide from a huge mistake by asking a question, didn't blame anybody, didn't say you did this wrong, didn't tell them what was incorrect. I just simply asked a question, which is the basis of coaching. And they figured it out relatively quickly for themselves. And that night I was invited to the bar. And I was no longer the office princess, because that was the nickname that I had, the office
Sure.
princess of the desert, right? And what they then called me is the desert fairy. So, like, what is the difference between an office princess and a desert fairy? The desert fairy makes magic happen in the desert, and the office princess comes to tell people what to
Right.
do in the desert
Right.
without having experienced the desert herself,
Right.
right? So thinking she might know better. So one was derogatory, the other one was actually quite complimentary.
Right.
My last day in the desert, when they found out that I was made redundant because the oil prices had tanked, I was already starting to shift into coaching. They lined up at the airport in their safety gear with magic wands that they had taken home from their daughters. And
Wow.
waved those magic wands as a goodbye. And so I will never forget that.
Oh my gosh, what a wonderful sort of wrap up to the transition between a job and being an entrepreneur. Like, that's a lovely story to sort of segue us into the fact that you're now teaching other folks the skills to be able to expand their own level of influence. Now, I know that you have the Intentionally You series, but you also have the Power Within Collective. And that's about teams, correct?
Absolutely. So when you are the leader and you are not intentionally yourself, right? You are matching energies around you that perhaps don't feel right for you to lead teams, to be a
Mhm.
leader.
Mhm.
And you're copying what you see around you that is successful. It might not work for you, and it didn't for me. I had to learn my own way. I had to learn my own style. I had to step into that style with power, and that power comes from within. And so, intentionally, you is about stepping back into your own power as a leader and understanding where your authenticity comes from. Like, what feels good for you? How do you align with your style, with your values, with the way you do things, the way you want to do things, and come from that position of strength versus trying to copy somebody else and it's wobbly ground, right? And you feel that.
For sure. For sure.
When you feel that, the team feels it too.
Yeah, that's very
So
true.
running those collectives, right, is I not only help the leader step into their own power, I also help them to empower the team.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
yeah,
Absolutely.
and so I do run both of these, and I also like people to learn from one another. So for me, those circles are important because people hear others' standpoints and viewpoints,
Sure.
and all of a sudden it opens discussions on, oh, I didn't even consider that, but that's such a valid point. Or, wow, I've just learned something new from my colleague and I never bothered asking before because we've come from different backgrounds or we're in different teams. And so, you know, opening up the conversation cross-functionally also creates opportunities.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So if you had to describe for our viewing and listening audience how you feel now as an entrepreneur, because I think we all take the skills and experience from our previous roles and we take that experience and now you're sharing it with others. If you had to give sort of a behind the scenes description of how you feel to be an entrepreneur, how would you describe it?
Well, in the beginning, I was stepping into this zone that I knew nothing about, right? I
Right.
had my operational skills and my
Sure.
operational knowledge. And sure, I did go to university and study an MBA, but that was, you know, how do I apply that learning for others?
Right.
Now I had to switch all that knowledge and go, and how do I apply that for myself? Only to discover that obviously some of my knowledge that I have in that space is from a few years ago, and it doesn't necessarily match to a small business. So there was a lot of learning and a lot of understanding that I'm just going to have to feel this fear, sit in this uncomfort for as long as it takes for me to feel comfortable that I get to know what I'm doing. To help
Right.
myself this time, I didn't wait to be picked. I literally surrounded myself with people that had the knowledge, that were already better than me. And I put myself in the rooms where I knew the least, purposefully and intentionally.
You know what? That's a really wonderful tip for other small business owners because I think sometimes we get into business and we feel this pressure that we have to know everything. You know,
Absolutely.
we've got to be right. We've got to be good at everything. We have to know everything. People are, our credibility factor is at stake, right? But what you're saying is be good at what you do and find others who can help you become comfortable at the things that you're not comfortable with or that you're not the best at, right? It doesn't come natural to you, right?
That's right. Yes, exactly. And so, you know, I think that some of that is like how we met as well, right? I'm not the best at marketing myself. My business has been built up on referrals. I had a fairly large network, but as you know, as an entrepreneur, you learn that that referral network does dry up and there is a cycle to this. So when you're in business for a while, I'm in business now for, this is my fourth year. It means that you get to know that cycle if you're paying attention. So you know when to start marketing yourself, and you know when to not sell because people are not paying attention because there's other things going on in the environment that you're trying to attract. So as an example, here in Australia, we have what we call a financial year end. That happens in June on the 31st. In June, there is no point in me marketing myself because everybody
Everyone's
is
busy.
busy with that financial year end, right?
Right.
What happens though is that from an entrepreneurial cycle as well, is I'm trying to attract, as you know, CEOs, C-suite executives, managers, directors, senior vice presidents, or even emerging leaders. Now, these go on holidays, and our summer is in December. So December is actually not a time where I can sit back and relax. It is, I have to figure out what I'm going to do to attract those people in January.
Yeah, for sure.
So that, sorry.
I love that you've mentioned that you have to pre-plan. You know, the marketing that we do has to come from some sort of a plan. It can't be this willy-nilly, oh, I'll throw a post up today and I'll wait and see what happens. And then we get all upset if we don't get, responses or DMs or whatever. You do have to have a strategic plan, a marketing plan, in order to fill that sales funnel.
Absolutely. And the visibility that sits behind that, right? You have to have the courage to make yourself visible. So these are some of the things that I didn't have when I first started. And then you get to know people that are in this in the entrepreneurship world themselves. Like we've met across the world. We met in London first, and then we met in Vancouver. Oh my God, it's just something that I treasure. And then you learn from people that have the knowledge like you do in how do you make yourself visible and how do you make yourself have the courage to do that. And then how do you plan? So you need to find the people that can help you with that knowledge or gaining that knowledge yourself. And sometimes it's not about the entire plan. It's just about help me get started because that's where I'm stuck. And it's asking for the help, right? And sometimes we just feel that we can't ask for help because it makes us look weak or makes us look like we don't know what we're doing. And I think that when you are in entrepreneurship, you have to be really willing to ask for help and then also recognize when you need to pivot because things are not working. Not too quickly though, but still need to understand that, okay, this is not working for me and I'm okay to change my mind and pivot to something else.
That's the nugget right there. You give yourself permission to make the pivot without beating yourself up by saying, oh my gosh, that didn't work. Why didn't it work? Let's do the whole, diagnostic on why it didn't work. Sometimes that's just a defeatist attitude. You might as well recognize it's not working, pivot and try something new, because what have you got to lose?
Nothing. And that's the thing that you learn, right? I've only got to lose if I keep trying and don't have the courage to say, okay, I've given this a good shot and now I'm just going to have to do something different. And what I use in that moment for myself is I love Michael Jordan's quote here. I either win or I learn. I never lose.
Right? That's a wonderful quote.
I love it because oftentimes in business, when you're by yourself, you can really easily go down the rabbit hole of I'm failing, I'm losing here, I'm not doing this well enough. And so you jump back into a box and then you make yourself smaller and smaller and smaller. And it's not about that. It's about what can I learn here? And I don't have to do a deep dive into the thing that I'm learning. If I take one piece of advice from the thing that I've just done that's not working, what would that be? And that's going, okay, now let's move forward.
How can I use, exactly.
And do it quickly, right? Because you don't have time as an entrepreneur to dwell on things.
Right. Take the momentum and move with the momentum, right?
That's right.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you've given us some really beautiful things to think about, Sinja, and congratulations on crossing that hurdle and being in business for 4 years, because, we all know that entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. And as the years move along, your expertise will grow and confidence level will grow as an entrepreneur. And I think you've got the best attitude in trying to find other folks who can help bring you up along the way. So thank you so much for sharing all those really wonderful things for us. One of the things that we do in our guest blog is we ask folks to share 3 words of advice. So as we wrap up our discussion for today, perhaps you can tell us why your 3 words are important to you in your business. And they are be bold and begin.
So be bold reminds me of my 2 mentors that said, don't wait to be asked. Be bold to put yourself forward. And have the courage to back yourself, have the courage to understand that you have a skill set and knowledge that is valuable, and value it yourself. And also value yourself to the extent that you know that you don't have to prove that you are valuable. So be bold reminds me of that every single day. It's like, I'm going to be bold. I'm going to ask for the things that I would like. I'm going to ask for the things that I know I need, and have the conversations that feel uncomfortable, but are necessary conversations. So that's why be bold is really important for me. It's the one thing that I learned from my corporate career that I carry with me. And I love it.
Well, I have to tell you that you've given us some really wonderful tips and tools, and you've also given us permission to begin, because every story has a beginning and you have to start somewhere. And I really appreciate the fact that you've shared with us some of the highlights, not only of your corporate career, but of being a successful entrepreneur. So I'd like to thank you for joining me today and giving us insight into your business journey.
Thank you very much, Trish. I really appreciated being on your podcast.
To our viewing and listening audience, I'd like to thank you for tuning in for this edition of Keeping It Real. And I'd like to send my personal thanks to all of our sponsors for their ongoing support. And I ask that you share and invite your friends to subscribe to our show, Business Mentorship, Keeping It Real, found on YouTube and your favorite podcast channel. Cindy and I would like to thank you for joining us, and we look forward to meeting you next time when we meet another business owner and celebrate their great idea.